in the dead of night. In the ancient Persian capital of Susa, the heavy silence is broken by the rhythmic sound of hammers and the dragging of timber. The problem is not merely that Haman is wicked. The problem is the sheer, illogical absurdity of the physical structure. To turn a personal grudge into an irreversible state law. The plan is flawless. The authority is absolute. As the couriers ride out, the city of Susa is thrown into bewildered terror by the sudden decree. But inside the heavily guarded palace walls, insulated from the panic echoing in the streets, the architects of this genocide relax. The text records one of the most unsettling sentences in all of Scripture. The king and Haman sat down to drink. Haman holds the ring, the decree, and the date. He is utterly untouchable, or so he thinks. With the genocide scheduled, Haman sits down to drink, believing he has secured his legacy. Haman walks out of the palace courtyard with his chest expanded and his head held high. He is intoxicated, not just by the royal wine, but by the intoxicating fumes of his own perceived invincibility. He has just returned from an exclusive, private banquet hosted by Queen Esther herself. Only 2 men in the entire empire were invited, the king and Haman. In his mind, he has reached the absolute summit of human achievement. He crosses the city to his palatial estate and immediately summons his wife, Zeresh, and his closest friends. He cannot keep his glory to himself. He needs an audience. Gathered in his private chambers, surrounded by the physical evidence of his success, Haman begins to recite his resume. He is demanding his workers build in the dark. Why does a government official need a 75-foot gallows to execute a single, unarmed prisoner? He boasts of the vast splendor of his riches. He boasts of his 10 sons, a symbol of extreme status and legacy in the ancient Near East. He gloats over how the king has elevated him above all the other nobles and princes. And, as the crowning piece of evidence of his supremacy, he reveals that Queen Esther has invited him to a second private banquet the very next day. He possesses immense wealth, a massive family, political supremacy, and exclusive access to the throne. He has 99% of the empire bowing at his feet. But as he finishes his boast, the atmosphere in the room sours. The memory of what he saw on his way home from the palace suddenly eclipses all of his gold. As he had passed the king's gate, Mordecai was still there. He had not bowed. He had not even trembled. Haman looks at his wife and his friends, and he makes a staggering confession. Despite the wealth, the sons, the promotion, and the banquets, he admits, yet all this is worth nothing to me, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. This single sentence exposes the fatal flaw of pride. It is a psychological and spiritual black hole. It cannot be filled. It cannot be satisfied. And it cannot enjoy the 99% of submission it receives if 1% is missing. The presence of a single, unbending Jew at the gate. A standard execution would require only a few feet of rope and a basic wooden frame. A public hanging in the city square would have easily achieved, is enough to render the vast wealth of the Persian Empire completely worthless to him. Pride demands total control. And when it is denied that control, it destroys the very person harboring it. Seeing his torment, his wife Zeresh and his friends offer a deadly solution to soothe his burning ego. They tell him not to wait 11 months for the nationwide decree to take effect. They tell him to kill the one man now. Have a gallows built, 50 cubits high, they suggest. And in the morning ask the king to have Mordecai hanged on it. Then go with the king to the banquet and enjoy yourself. The sheer physical absurdity of this advice is striking. A 50-cubit pole is 75 feet tall. It requires immense labor, heavy engineering, and a small fortune in timber to erect. It is not an instrument of justice. It is a monument to a fragile ego. But Haman is so blinded by his need for validation that the idea delights him. He immediately issues the orders. This is where the opening image of our story comes into full focus. In the dead of night, the hammers begin to swing. The heavy timber is dragged into the courtyard. the massive beam is raised into the dark Persian sky. The trap is perfectly set. The wood is measured and secured. Haman has the influence. He has the plan. And he has the gallows. The physical goal of removing a political enemy. But for Haman, physical removal was no longer enough. The height of the wood reveals the depth of the disease. All he needs is a brief moment of the king's permission in the morning, and his ultimate victory will be complete. But before the sun can rise, the unseen God of Israel finally makes his move, not with a flash of lightning, not with a parted sea, but with a sudden, perfectly timed case of insomnia. Section 6. The Sleepless King. The most powerful man on earth commands an empire stretching from India to Ethiopia. But on this specific night, he cannot command his own eyelids to close. King Xerxes is suffering from insomnia. In a world before digital distraction, the restless monarch orders his servants to bring the royal chronicles, the official historical records of his reign, and read them aloud. In the quiet of the royal bedchamber, the heavy scrolls are unrolled. Out of all the years of recorded history, out of all the thousands of pages of taxation and political events, the servant happens to read the exact entry, detailing a thwarted assassination plot. Years earlier, 2 guards had conspired to murder the king, and the treason had been exposed by a Jewish official named Mordecai. The king stops the reading. He asks a simple bureaucratic question. What honor or dignity has been bestowed on Mordecai for this? The servants search the records. Nothing has been done for him. At that exact moment, the sound of footsteps echoes in the outer court. Haman did not just want this man dead. He wanted him humiliated on a cosmic scale. He wanted a corpse suspended so high that his absolute supremacy, it is the breaking of dawn. And Haman has arrived early. He cannot wait another hour. He has come to ask the king's permission to hang the man who saved the king's life on the 75-foot spike currently waiting in his courtyard. The king hears the noise and orders Haman to be brought in. But before Haman can utter a single syllable about the gallows, Xerxes speaks first. He asks a question that will serve as the ultimate trap for a narcissistic mind. What should be done for the man the king delights to honor? This is the turning point of the narrative. A moment of profound, dark, biblical comedy. The text grants us access to Haman's internal monologue. Blinded by the intoxicating illusion of his own supremacy, Haman thinks to himself, "Whom would the king delight to honor more than me?" When Haman answers the king, he does not ask for silver or land. He already possesses immense wealth. Instead, his answer reveals the deepest, darkest craving of his ego. He wants the king's identity. Haman tells Xerxes to bring a royal robe that the king himself has worn. He asks for a horse that the king himself has ridden, one with a royal crest placed on its head. And finally, he asks that one of the king's most noble princes would be visible from every rooftop, street, and courtyard in the capital city. The Book of Esther focuses so heavily on the exact dimensions of this gallows, be forced to lead this horse through the city square, shouting out to the crowds, "Thus shall it be done, to the man whom the king delights to honor." Haman is not just asking for a reward. He is describing his ultimate fantasy of universal worship. He wants the entire city to look at him and see the authority of the throne. The words have left his mouth. The trap is perfectly constructed. Xerxes listens to the elaborate plan and completely agrees. Make haste. The king commands, "Take the robes and the horse, as you have said, and do so." Haman's heart must have soared in that fraction of a second. But the name the king speaks next shatters Haman's world into 1,000 pieces. "And do so for Mordecai the Jew, who sits at the king's gate. Leave out nothing that you have mentioned." The architectural perfection of God's justice is stunning. Haman assumed he was writing the script for his own coronation. Instead, he just accidentally dictated the exact terms of his own absolute. Public humiliation. He came to the palace to ask for a hanging. Now, he is forced to take the robes he coveted, walk back out to the gate, and place them on the shoulders of the man he intended to impale. Imagine the agonizing walk from the inner court of the palace back to the king's gate. Because this text is not just a historical account of political intrigue. It is a brilliant, surgical exposure of the pathology of human pride. Haman's hands, which just hours earlier were eager to order a death warrant, are now carrying the heavy, embroidered fabric of the king's own robe. He must approach the very man he loathes, strip away his ordinary garments, and drape Mordecai in the ultimate symbol of imperial favor. Then comes the parade. Haman must take the reins of the royal horse and walk through the sprawling city square of Susa. The sensory humiliation is absolute. He feels the dust of the street clinging to his sandals while his sworn enemy sits elevated above him. He must listen to the sound of his own voice echoing against the stone walls, repeatedly shouting the exact phrase he had rehearsed for his own glory. "Thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor." This is not simply an ironic twist of fate. It is the theological mechanism of biblical justice. God frequently addresses human pride not by striking the proud from a distance, but by forcing them to physically act out the exact humiliation they engineered for someone else. Haman wanted Mordecai lifted up on a pole for public mockery. Instead, God lifts Mordecai up on a royal horse for public glory, and uses Haman as the announcer. When the torturous parade finally ends, the paths of the two men sharply diverge. Scripture uses the character of Haman to reveal a devastating spiritual law. Unrepentant pride does not simply invite God's judgment. Mordecai quietly returns to his post at the king's gate. His posture has not changed. His character remains steady, but Haman's reality is rapidly unraveling. Scripture tells us that Haman rushed to his house, mourning and with his head covered, just a few days earlier. Mordecai had covered himself in sackcloth and ashes to mourn Haman's decree. Now, the emotional roles are entirely reversed. Haman retreats into his palatial estate to hide his face in shame. He immediately gathers the exact same audience he had assembled the night before, his wife Zeresh and his closest advisors. Yesterday, he had stood before them, boasting of his invincibility and his wealth. Today, he recounts every humiliating detail of his collapse. But the response he receives from his inner circle is chilling. The very people who fed his ego and suggested building the gallows abandon him instantly. Zeresh looks at the husband she told to build the 50-cubit pole and delivers a devastating prophecy. "If Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, is of the Jewish people," she says, "you will not overcome him but will surely fall before him." The pagan wife of the Agagite recognizes what Haman's blind ambition could not see. You cannot wage war against the covenant people of God and expect to survive. The trajectory is already set. The collapse has begun, and it will. It actively manufactures the very instruments of its own destruction. As we investigate this story, we will discover that Haman is not ultimately destroyed by Esther's political influence. Be absolute. Haman has barely registered this betrayal when heavy footsteps interrupt the conversation. The king's eunuchs have arrived at his door. They do not give him time to mourn. They do not give him time to formulate a new plan. And most importantly, they do not give him time to dismantle the 75-foot execution spike towering over his courtyard. They hurry him away to the second banquet with Queen Esther. But the ultimate price has not yet been paid. As Haman takes his seat at the feast, his hands trembling and his pride shattered, he does not realize the final trap is about to spring. At the banquet table, the queen is preparing to point a finger at the man who thought he controlled the empire. At the second banquet, the atmosphere in the private chamber is suffocating. Wine is poured into golden goblets, but Haman cannot enjoy it. His mind is still reeling from the humiliation in the city square. King Xerxes, oblivious to the terror sitting beside him, asks Esther the same question. He has asked twice before. "What is your petition?" "Queen Esther, it shall be granted you." This time, Esther does not deflect. She does not ask for provinces or wealth. She asks for her life, and the life of her people. She reveals that they have been sold out to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated, quoting the exact legal language of Haman's decree, or Mordecai's strategic brilliance. He is systematically dismantled by every single plan, word, and structure he creates to elevate himself. Xerxes is stunned. The careless monarch who handed away his signet ring suddenly demands to know the architect of this treason. Who is he? And where is he? Who has dared do this? Esther raises her hand and points directly at the man sitting beside them. A foe and enemy. This wicked Haman. The illusion of Haman's control shatters instantly. He is paralyzed with terror. The king, enraged that the official he trusted has manipulated him into ordering the death of his own queen, storms out into the palace garden to pace in the evening air. Haman is left alone with Esther. He realizes his life is forfeit. In a desperate, pathetic panic, the man who demanded the entire Persian Empire bow to him now throws himself onto the queen's couch to beg for mercy. But God's timing is absolute. The king walks back into the banquet room at the exact moment Haman falls onto Esther. Xerxes misinterprets the chaotic scene as a physical assault. Will he even assault the queen in my presence? In my own house? As soon as those words leave the king's mouth, the royal guards step forward and cover Haman's face. He is no longer a prince, he is a dead man. At that precise moment, Harbona, one of the royal eunuchs, casually speaks up. He mentions a detail he likely noticed when he went to Haman's estate. A massive beam of wood is being hauled through the courtyards of a private, palatial estate. The men assembling it are working under frantic, immediate orders. The man Haman wants to impale on this monstrous spike is a Jewish exile named Mordecai. Their conflict appears to begin with a simple, earlier that evening to retrieve him. Look, the gallows 50 cubits high, which Haman has made for Mordecai, whose word saved the king, stands at Haman's house. The king gives the final, devastating order: hang him on that. Haman is dragged from the palace and hoisted onto the massive wooden beam he constructed in his own courtyard. The 75-foot monument to his pride becomes the instrument of his public execution. Notice what keeps repeating in Scripture. This is not simply a clever literary irony unique to the Book of Esther. It is a cross-Bible pattern of divine justice. When Pharaoh decreed that Hebrew infants must be thrown into the Nile River, he and his army were eventually drowned in the waters of the Red Sea. When Goliath terrorized Israel, he was ultimately beheaded with his own massive sword. When Judas betrayed Jesus, the very silver he sought became the wage of his own destruction. The pattern is inescapable. Evil always builds its own gallows. God rarely has to invent a new weapon to judge human pride. He simply steps back and allows the proud to be consumed by the machinations they built to destroy others. Haman's arrogance blinded him to the fact that his obsessive need for vengeance was actually an act of architectural suicide, isolated refusal of court protocol. Every day, as Haman passes through the king's gate, all the royal officials bow down and pay him homage. This ancient history reveals an uncomfortable truth about the resentments we harbor today. To understand the full weight of this pattern, we must look away from the Persian Empire and look at the structures we are building in our own minds. Most of us will never construct a physical 75-foot execution spike in our courtyards, but the architecture of pride is rarely made of physical wood. We build our gallows out of resentment, obsession, and the desperate need to be proven right. When someone injures our ego, or when a quiet offense takes root, we often retreat into the dark spaces of our minds. We swing the hammers of our internal monologue. We haul the heavy timber of our grudges, assembling a mental structure where we imagine our enemy finally facing their absolute humiliation. We measure their failures. We rehearse our arguments. Pride tells you that harboring this bitterness is a form of armor. It promises that if you can just control the narrative and orchestrate their downfall, you will finally feel secure. But the Book of Esther exposes the lie. The biblical pattern remains unbroken. Whenever you build a structure designed to destroy someone else, you are actively measuring your own neck. Unforgiveness is not protection. It is an act of architectural suicide. This is why Scripture demands that we release our need for vengeance. Mordecai refused. He will not kneel. His posture remains rigid, and he will not explain himself beyond stating his Jewish identity. What offense are you rehearsing right now? Who is the person you feel must be brought low before you can find peace? The demand for control does not protect you, it traps you. To dismantle this structure, you must follow a deliberate process. Recognize what is happening in your mind. Name the resentment honestly. Place it within the larger truth of God's perfect justice. And choose to deliberately step away from the heavy timber of your anger. Release the need for an immediate result, and leave the vindication to God. But this story is not simply a moral warning about the dangers of bitterness. It is a foreshadowing of the most profound reversal in human history. Centuries after Haman was taken down from his monument in Susa, another wooden beam was erected. This time just outside the walls of Jerusalem, the ultimate enemy of humanity, blinded by the very same arrogance, orchestrated what he believed to be the final execution. The powers of darkness manipulated the Empire of Rome, utilized the apathy of a political governor, and built a wooden cross to permanently humiliate the Son of God. The trap was perfectly set. The nails were driven. The enemy believed he had finally secured his absolute supremacy. To Haman, this single point of resistance becomes a maddening obsession. It consumes his vast wealth and poisons his exclusive banquet. But God used the exact same mechanism of justice. The Apostle Paul writes in Colossians that at the cross, God disarmed the spiritual rulers and authorities. He did not just defeat them quietly, he made a public spectacle of them, triumphing over them by the very cross they had built. The cross was designed to be the gallows for Jesus. Instead, God turned it into the instrument that publicly humiliated and destroyed the kingdom of darkness forever. We began this journey in the dead of night. Listening to the rhythmic sound of hammers and the dragging of timber, we watched a man consumed by his own ego build a massive wooden beam that pierced the skyline, convinced it would secure his legacy. You do not need to build a monument to your pain. Look at the cross and let go of your own gallows. Step away from the dark work of resentment and trust the perfect, silent justice of the God who is always working in the background. The enemy will always build his own grave. You only have to remain faithful and remain standing. If this study helped you see the patterns of Scripture more clearly, please consider subscribing and sharing this video with someone who might need encouragement today and drives him into the night to build a towering monument of vengeance. But this sudden, explosive hatred cannot be explained by a single interaction at a gate. A reaction this severe is never just about the present moment. To understand why this specific man hated this specific Jew with such genocidal intensity, we cannot start in the Persian Empire. We have to rewind biblical history by 500 years. The conflict in Susa was not the beginning. It was the echo of an ancient war. When the author of the Book of Esther introduces the two central figures of this conflict, they do not just provide their names. They deliberately provide their ancestry. In the modern world, genealogies are often skipped as irrelevant historical data. But to an ancient Hebrew reader, the family trees of these two men, when they are finished, the structure will pierce the eastern skyline. It will stand 50 cubits high, approximately 75 feet. Would have sounded like a warning siren. In the second chapter, we are told that Mordecai is a Benjamite, specifically a descendant of a man named Kish. Just one chapter later, the villain is introduced. He is called Haman the Agagite. Those two names, Kish and Agag, carry the weight of a 500-year-old failure. 5 centuries earlier, before the temple was built, before David took the throne, Israel's first king was crowned. His name was Saul, and he was the son of Kish. In et Samuel Femton, God gives Saul a devastating and strict military command. He is ordered to execute total judgment upon the Amalekites, a brutal nation that had mercilessly attacked the weakest and most vulnerable Israelites in the wilderness decades before. Saul goes to battle and wins a decisive victory, but he disobeys the command. He keeps the best of the plunder for himself, and, most importantly, he spares the life of the Amalekite ruler, King Agag. Because of this compromise, the prophet Samuel arrives, pronounces that God has rejected Saul as king, and publicly executes Agag himself. It is a violent, tragic rupture in Israel's history. The son of Kish compromised, leaving an opening for the lineage of Agag to survive. Now, fast forward 5 centuries to the Persian capital. The dust of the ancient battlefield has long settled, but the spiritual war has not ended, the equivalent of a modern 7-story building. This is not a watchtower. It is not a monument to a great military victory. It is an execution device. Haman the Agagite has just been promoted to the second highest seat in the most powerful empire on earth. As he walks through the king's gate, heavily guarded and cloaked in imperial authority, hundreds of royal servants fall to the pavement. But as the crowd drops to the ground, one solitary figure remains standing. Sitting at the gate, directly in his path, is a son of Kish. This completely changes how we read their silent confrontation. This is not a random workplace rivalry or a petty clash of egos. It is a generational blood feud. When Mordecai looks up and sees Haman expecting worship, he does not just see a corrupt Persian politician. He sees the embodiment of an ancient, predatory evil. Mordecai is standing exactly where his royal ancestor compromised. By locking his knees and refusing to put his face in the dirt, he is refusing to repeat the tragic failure of King Saul. He will not yield to the enemy his family was supposed to defeat. And when Haman discovers that the man defying him is a Jew, the ancient hatred ignites. Haman is not just reacting to a momentary slight. He is attempting to finish what his ancestors started. He wants to exterminate the lineage that humiliated his royal house 500 years ago. The stakes have instantly moved from a petty grievance to a generational, biblical showdown. Haman's wounded pride is fueled by centuries of historical poison, and it is being built by a man who already possesses almost everything the empire has to offer. Most readers of the Book of Esther, the weight of 5 centuries of hatred has collided in a single moment of refused protocol. The tension is drawn tight. But a man with a grudge is not truly dangerous until he acquires the power of the empire. And it all begins to unravel with a seemingly insignificant gesture at the king's gate. Every morning, the same silent ritual plays out at the king's gate. As Haman approaches, surrounded by the heavy armor of his royal entourage, the courtyard echoes with the sound of rustling garments and knees hitting the stone pavement. Hundreds of powerful Persian officials press their faces to the dust, offering absolute submission to the second most powerful man in the world. Yet, every single day, the visual perfection of that submission is ruined by a single vertical figure. Mordecai refuses to bow. He does not organize a protest. He does not shout insults. He simply remains standing, his posture serving as a quiet, immovable wall against Haman's demand for worship. To a secure leader, a single dissenter in a crowd of hundreds would be a minor annoyance. The dissenter might be ignored, or perhaps quietly disciplined by a lower-ranking guard. But Haman is not a secure man. His identity is entirely dependent on external validation. Scripture notes that when Haman finally noticed Mordecai's posture, he was not merely annoyed or politically offended. The text states that he was filled with rage. The English translation, however, softens the biological reality, are entirely familiar with the man who ordered its construction. Haman the Agagite is widely remembered as a classic biblical villain of what is happening inside the official. The Hebrew word used for this specific anger is hema. While it is accurately translated as wrath or fury, its root meaning is far more physical. Hema implies intense heat, a burning fever, or venom. In other biblical texts, such as Deuteronomy and the Psalms, it is used to describe the poisonous venom of a serpent. The original audience would have heard a deeply physical image. Haman is not just experiencing a temporary flash of irritation. Mordecai's refusal to bow has injected a toxin into his bloodstream. The perceived disrespect is literally sickening him. This reveals the terrifying, parasitic nature of the human ego. Pride cannot tolerate a single point of resistance. It is an internal black hole that requires universal submission to survive. If 1,000 men bow to the pavement, but one man remains standing, the proud heart cannot enjoy the 1,000. It can only obsess over the one. For Haman, Mordecai's upright posture is not just a breach of court protocol. It is an existential threat to the false reality Haman has constructed, a reality where he is a supreme figure who commands the absolute reverence of the world. Because one man refuses to participate in this illusion, Haman decides that the punishment must be absolute. He does not simply order the royal guards to assassinate the insubordinate official. That would address the immediate problem. In standard religious education and cultural celebrations, he is often presented as a flat, predictable antagonist, a wealthy, arrogant official who hates the Jewish people. But it would not soothe the burning venom of Haman. Instead, he decides that because this one Jew will not bow, the entire Jewish race within the borders of Persia must be annihilated. The sheer disproportion of this response exposes the madness of pride. A minor personal slight metastasizes into genocidal ambition. Haman is willing to wipe an entire civilization off the map simply to bandage his bruised ego. The poison has now fully compromised his reason. His mind is entirely consumed by a vision of total ethnic destruction. But a man with a grudge, even a deadly one, is not truly dangerous until he acquires the power of the empire. Haman cannot authorize a global massacre using only his own voice. He realizes he needs the king's authority to execute his personal vengeance. The deadliest weapon in the Persian Empire was not a bronze sword or a heavy war chariot. It was a small piece of engraved metal worn on the hand of a bored monarch to annihilate an entire civilization. Haman knows he cannot act unilaterally. He must manipulate the machinery of the state. He approaches King Xerxes not with the foaming rage he feels privately, but with the cold, calculated language of a political strategist, plots their sudden destruction, and is ultimately outsmarted by a courageous queen and her clever uncle. But when we read the narrative simply, he does not name Mordecai. He does not even name the Jewish people. Instead, he uses the vague, bureaucratic phrasing of a tyrant manufacturing a national crisis. There is a certain people, Haman tells the king, scattered abroad and dispersed among the peoples in all the provinces of your realm. Their laws are different from those of every other people, and they do not keep the king's laws, so that it is not to the king's profit to tolerate them. He packages his personal vendetta as an urgent matter of national security, and, to ensure the king's compliance, Haman offers a staggering financial incentive: 10,000 talents of silver to be paid directly into the royal treasuries. This was an astronomical sum, estimated by historians to be equivalent to roughly 2/3 of the annual revenue of the entire Persian Empire. The king's response is chilling in its apathy. Xerxes does not ask for evidence of a rebellion. He does not ask for the name of this supposedly dangerous ethnic group. He simply slides the heavy gold signet ring from his finger and hands it to Haman. That ring represented the absolute, irreversible authority of the ancient world. Whatever was stamped with its seal became a law of the Medes and Persians, which could not be undone, not even by the king himself. The sheer banality of this evil is terrifying, as a triumphant tale of a bad man being outmaneuvered by good people. We miss the terrifying psychological reality playing out beneath the surface. Millions of lives are signed away without a moment of hesitation, simply because an ambitious official lied, and a negligent ruler could not be bothered to investigate. But Haman is not leaving his victory to politics alone. He seeks spiritual validation. He summons the astrologers and casts the pur, the ancient equivalent of rolling dice or casting lots. He is searching for the most auspicious day on the pagan calendar to carry out his massacre. The lots fall on the 12th month, the month of Adar. Haman believes that fate itself has endorsed his hatred. He assumes that the gods of chance have handed him a perfect victory, entirely ignoring the unseen God who actually governs the universe. The royal secretaries are immediately summoned. The scribes frantically write the edict in every language of the empire. The decree commands the citizens to destroy, or kill, and annihilate all Jews young and old, women and children in a single day, and to plunder their goods. The wax is melted. The signet ring is pressed into the seal, couriers mount their fast horses and scatter across the known world, carrying a sentence of death to the innocent. Haman has successfully leveraged the king's apathy,